Good morning, everybody. Today, I'm going to touch upon an important topic, which is very important for you at this point of time. And this is about your research problem or graduate research problem. All of you have joined in a PhD program in your respective department and will soon be getting into mainstream doing active research. While you go and carry out your research, it is very important that you need to have a problem to solve. Every PhD is granted on a problem which has been solved. The problem should be prior unsolved. That means that you cannot take a problem where the solution already exists and resolve the problem. You don't get PhD for that. PhD you get for finding solution to an original research problem. So it is very important that we understand which problem to work on, which project to work on. Now, there are various ways how a student comes across PhD problem. In many places, which most commonly happens, is that the problem is passed on to the student on an existing research project which is going on in the student's advisor's laboratory. In this case, the student, after doing the coursework, when he joins the laboratory for carrying out his research, then the advisor gives them existing research project which the student is supposed to take it further. There are merits and demerits of each of these. In that case, the student does not have any choice whether he likes the problem or not. It seems that the problem is put over or given over to the student. In one case, you can say that it is not so good because the student has got no say in taking the problem that he would be spending his time on the next 5 years of his life. He has no say. He just takes the problem which is given on to him. This may be seen as a disadvantage to a student or demerit of this kind of process. Now, the merit for such a process also is there. The merit is that the student does not have to spend time in finding a problem. The student is already given a ready-made problem. The student saves some time in that process because no time is wasted in finding a problem. Student gets a problem right away. So that can be seen as a merit in this kind of processes where the problem is handed over to the student right away. What is the other way of getting a research problem? The other way of getting a research problem is to develop a research problem before the student really start working on it. So that means the student chooses his or her own problem, research problem, and then finally works on it. So that means that no research problem which was earlier going on in the lab is handed over to the student. The student has to find a research problem and then the student has to find a solution to the research problem so as to get a degree. Now, this seems more harder a path, more challenging a path because the student has to first spend time finding a problem and then he has to spend time solving a problem. The challenge which lies in front of the student is that he is just beginning to get exposed to the research. The student does not really know about the area where he is going to work on. The student does not understand the difficulty in the problem that he would be working on. The student is very naive. So it is sort of like asking a very naive person who has just entered graduate research after completion of his undergraduate degree to come up with a problem which will be accepted as a good problem by the experts who are working in that area for 10 or 15 years or more. That may seem that it's a very difficult proposition, and that is where guide also comes into play because guide is an expert in this area. However, in this second method, guide does not impose his research problem onto the student, but guide interacts with the student on a daily basis, helps student in identifying a problem, and not only identifying a problem, the guide helps student in identifying a problem which will have greater acceptance if solved, which will be more rewarding to the student if the project is completed. In that case, the student really works with the advisor in identifying a research problem. Personally, if you ask me, then I think the second option is better because in this case, the student is involved in identifying a research problem which the student really wants to follow. This method also has merits and demerits. The demerit would be that the student would have to spend some more time in identifying a research problem which the student want to pursue. But the merit is that in this path, the student gets to choose his or her problem. The boundaries of knowledge increases drastically for the student as the student explores the field in identifying a problem. So that means the student has to do a lot of reading, understanding, assimilation of ideas and concepts before identifying a problem. So the advantage is that the student really comes out stronger through this process of identifying a research problem. So I just placed as of now two methods by which a student is given a research problem. One method, as I said, is that guides hands over the problem, and the other method, what I have said, is the student identifies the problem working in liaison with the guide. If the student is given the problem right away, the advantage is that not much time is lost in identifying the problem. The student gets the problem right away. But the disadvantage is that the student has no say on the problem which is going to work on. Whether the student likes it or not likes it, the student has to solve. And often it is the case the student even don't understand the problem which has been given to him because of lack of exposure and lack of prior knowledge in that area. So those are the demerits. Whereas the other method which I just spoken about is that the student has to spend some time in increasing knowledge domain in this area and then identifies the problem. He identifies a couple of problems and then chooses the one that he wants to do for his graduate research. So in the process, the student becomes stronger, even though the demerit is that the student has to spend some time. But in this case, the student has found a problem which the student likes. The question is that do you really have to take a project which you like as opposed to any project which is given to you? Think of this. The question that remains at this point is it important to work on a project which the student likes? The answer to that is obviously yes, because if somebody is made to work on a project which the student does not like, then the student can never identify himself or herself with the project. Student can never identify. Student always feel that this is not his or her project. This is the advisor's project. This is advisor's interest that he is pursuing, and hence as a result there is a bit of non-association with the project, and hence the student cannot really give 100% onto the project because student never identifies with the project. Student always think that this is something which my advisor has asked me to do. This is not something which I would like to do, and hence the student cannot exert himself completely for the project. So from a project perspective, that is not a good thing. Like for any project, the researcher or the workers in the project, they have to give 100% or beyond 100% to get the project succeed. That is not a really good scenario. The student don't really understand the project, and second, the student cannot really associate himself or herself with the project, and hence because of the lack of getting related to the project, student often does not give 100%, and as a result the probability of project succeeding becomes very less. Let us take a look at the second scenario which I have spoken about. In this case, the student spends time, develops his own research project. In the course of doing so, with the help of the advisor, obviously, the student learns about the field, becomes stronger, becomes more knowledgeable, and then identifies the problem. In this second method, where the student identifies the problem for his or her graduate research, the important thing which comes in favor of this method is that students think that it is his or her problem. The student directly relates to the problem, the student identifies with the problem, and as a result, the student gives more than 100% in the problem. The student really works hard because now the problem has been defined and chosen by the student, and hence this has to be taken to completion by the student. The student completely aligns, identifies with the project, and works hard to get the project to completion. This is a very good scenario as far as the project is concerned, because if the researcher believes in the project, then the chances are the project will converge or go to completion more favorably than the scenario where the student does not identify himself or herself with the project. Let us come back to the research problem. Yes, research problem, as far as we know now, that it is something which is very important for every graduate student. And second thing, what we have also found is that there are two ways a research problem can be given to students. One, the first one in which it is handed over to the student from some pre-existing project in the lab. And the second one is the student identifies the problem himself and take it further. And we have spoken about advantages and disadvantages of the research problem for both of these methods. So now we would be going to something which is more important. Try to step back and look at a research problem. What should be a research problem of a PhD student? As you may remember that in the beginning of the class, I have said that this research problem cannot be a solved problem. Then it is no longer a problem. If a problem which has the answer to is already discovered, then that is not considered to be a problem anymore because people have the solution. A research problem should be one which should not have been solved. So this should be something which is original problem, which is not solved yet, and that the solution to that does not exist in the literature. Now, for PhD, it is a widely accepted phenomenon that original research problems are accepted everywhere. The student has to work on an original research problem. In the next few minutes, we are going to look at what is the original research problem. A few things that one may think is that what kind of problem is this? How long this problem will take to solve? Whether this problem is going to be an easy problem to solve or a hard problem to solve. The few things comes to a student's mind that how long do I need this problem for? Obviously, there is no upper limit to research. PhD. Nobody guarantees that you have to finish PhD in 5 years or 6 years. There is no upper limit. It is when you have found a solution to a problem which is significant enough to grant you a PhD, you can get your PhD. So that means that if you solve a PhD problem, a difficult PhD problem, you can solve it in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, you can get your PhD. You may also take 5 years, 6 years, 7 years to solve a problem, then also you will get your PhD. Also, you won't be able to solve a PhD problem in 2 months or 1 month. So what it means that the duration of the problem, duration it would take a problem cannot be a very small one. It cannot be so easy that it can be solved in 2 months. It can be solved in a day. So that will definitely not be a PhD problem. A PhD problem would at least take a minimum 2.5, 3 years, 4 years to solve. So it has to be a significantly big problem. Now, to the first question that we have asked, whether this should be an easy problem or a difficult problem, one answer to that we can converge on is that it cannot be so easy that it's solved in a month's time. So that will definitely not qualify as a PhD problem. And it is up to the guide and the student, a PhD student, to decide what qualifies for a PhD problem. So there the role of guide comes into play. Even for the first method, when guide is handing over a project to the student, that project should have enough challenges and difficulty to engage the student to come to a solution in more than 2 or 3 or 4 years for him or her to get a PhD degree. And in the second process also, where guide and students work together to define a problem, the problem they define could take at least more than 2 to 3 to 4 years to solve. It cannot be solved in one day and claim for your PhD right away. No, that would not be possible. One thing that we realize that PhD problem is something or which would require a larger duration of time frame to be solved. It cannot be solved in a month. So on an average, let me tell you, the average PhD time is about 6 years. So that means that the problem which takes at least on an average 6 years to solve cannot be something which is really easy. At this point, all of us agree that the PhD problem is big problem to solve, which will engage a student for 5 to 6 years. Now, if you're a student, then it occurs to you that this is a big problem. I can get it by both ways, as has been mentioned. And then one can say, what kind of problem? I know it is a big problem and it will take a long time to solve, but what kind of problem should I choose? Should I choose a problem which will take long term but not very challenging? And also, should I take a problem which will take long term but also very challenging? Those are the questions that confronts a PhD candidate. That should I take a long term problem which is easy to solve, which is not very challenging, or should I take a long term problem which is challenging and difficult to solve? To answer that question, there are two perspectives. So one perspective of the students say that, okay, I'm going to stay for 5 years, I'm going to be working on a long-term problem, but let me just choose an easy problem, which will be easy to solve. And another set of students may think opposite. He says, okay, I'm going to spend 5 years, let me choose a problem which is more difficult, more original problem and difficult to solve. Now, what is the answer to this? Which is the best solution? Now, answer to this lies with the student. The question which is asked to the student is that why are you doing PhD? What is the reason for you to do PhD? Now, in most of the cases, students say, okay, I'm going to do PhD because I want to see at the end what is there at the end of the field. I want to place myself in a higher orbit. I want to place myself in a higher strata. I'm going to lift myself professionally, socially, economically to a very high stage from where I am right now in. Then the question is, if you're going to do PhD to uplift yourself, then definitely you should work on a problem which will give you maximum lift, which will jettison you or place you to a higher orbit. The problem which cannot give you too much of reward or return is not a good problem to work on. The problem which will give you higher return, the problem which will give you higher reward, that should be a better problem to work on. And the argument goes as such towards the second line of thought, that anyway you are going to spend 5 or 6 years towards solving a problem, then why not solve a problem which is original, which is difficult, and would give you a higher return and will be more rewarding. The reward at the end of the PhD is very much dependent on the research problem. A good research problem, when solved, will give a good return to the researcher and will place the researcher in a higher orbit. So now, if you come back and connect the dot, you understand that what is the importance of this research problem. You cannot work on any problem. Any problem will mean nothing. You must work on a problem which is problem that you don't feel that it is imposed on you. You must work on a problem which you feel that you chose. You have some say in choosing the problem. Now, once you have done that, you must work on a problem which will give you maximum return. So that is why it is very important for all of you to choose a good research problem. What is a good research problem? A good research problem is a one which is original, which is challenging, and which will give you higher return, which will be difficult to solve, also which is original. Now, what is a bad research problem? A bad research problem may be incremental. Maybe it is a research problem which will qualify for PhD, but certain variants of it is already solved. So you are just taking something and then applying on some other system. The solution is out there for one system and you are taking that and putting it on a similar system. The chances of the solution being translated to another system succeeding is quite high. So that means that with less effort, just by translation, you will be able to solve the project. But problem is, even after solve the project, the credit for solving the project will not come to you, because it is a incremental problem, advancement of knowledge. The similar problem have been solved earlier. So even though you solve the project, you don't get much credit for it. So if your research project is an incremental project, then even if you solve 99% of the project, you don't get much credit because similar projects have already been solved. Whereas if you look at a research project which is absolutely untouched, very challenging, very original, nobody has worked on it, even if you solve 30% of the project or 40% of the project which nobody has even solved, you will get maximum credit. Here we see we have two kinds of research projects. One which are incremental advancement of knowledge, where something which is related has been solved and you are just solving the similar thing on a similar platform, and you solve it completely 99% or so, you don't get much credit even for solving near completion. Whereas if you work on an original research project, in that case, even a 30 or 40% of the solution will be viewed with a lot of respect and regard. So for a PhD student, that's why it is very important to choose a good a research project which will be very rewarding, which will be acceptable, and which will be challenging, and which the student will also identify and find a solution, work hard to find a solution to. So over the past half an hour or so, I have been talking to you about the importance of a good research problem. And this research problem, as I mentioned, that will be the problem for you for next 5 or 6 years of your life till you submit your thesis. And it is very important that you try to think about the research problem, how it affects you, what kind of problem you should work. Step back and think, because this is what is going to be the deliverable for you. Because once you undertake a project which you are not too convinced, not too sure, and most likely cannot identify with, then it will be very difficult for you to deliver a solution to the project. And if you fail to deliver a solution to the project, then obviously it will be difficult for you to get the degree. Let me just summarize. Research problem right now, I believe, is something very important. It can be given to you, or you can decide to choose it for you. It is not something which can be solved in a few months or few minutes. It has to be long enough to qualify as a PhD research problem, to keep you engaged at least 2, 3, or 4 years or 5 years of your research input. And in the end, when completed, it should be able to place you in a higher orbit. It should be able to lift you to a higher level. What are the general higher levels available to you post PhD? Will be postdoctoral research opportunities. The field of chemistry demands you to do at least 1 or 2 postdocs before you would be considered as the independent chemist to start your own career. So a good research problem will be able to find you a good placement as a postdoc in reputed universities across the globe, in the United States, Germany, Japan, and other places. And that will give you exposure to all the state-of-the-art laboratories that exist. These are all Makkah of research. You should be able to go and get your experience there as well. So for you, the thing that which will take you to that level of higher opportunity will be your own PhD research problem. You should be very careful. You should very seriously choose what problem that you would be working on. What I focused on was the importance of a research problem. This is something that you should try to think a little about before you jump into any problem, because most of the time your PhD tenure is restricted by the fellowship you get, and the fellowship duration more or less in our country is about 5 years, maybe extendable a little bit to 5.5 years or 6 years. So that means that you get 6 years to solve your PhD problem. Sometimes what happens is student works on a problem, then in second and third year finds that this problem is not good enough. Many a time the student has to start another problem to work on after realizing that the first problem they worked on was not good, or they did not get results to get them a degree. So in that case, the student would be hard pressed against time to finish his PhD during the scholarship tenure, and many a time it so happens that he surpasses the scholarship tenure, and then he has to pay from your own pocket to finish his degree. Because at that point, beyond second year or third year, it becomes point of no return. Why it becomes a point of no return? Because now that you have spent 2 or 3 years towards the degree, you cannot just walk away without a degree. The attrition rate for people getting PhD is very high. So whoever starts the journey, almost everybody finishes the degree. Nobody walks out saying that, okay, try for 5 years. If it doesn't work out, I will not take a degree. So that means that even if the first problem doesn't work, they quickly migrate to a second problem, and through which they get their degree. If one is not very careful about choosing the problem, they may have to, and later on find that the problem given to him or her is not good, So in that case, the person has to migrate to another problem where in the process the person might lose some valuable scholarship period. I'm coming to an end of today's lecture. I have put across to you the importance of research topic in PhD, and this I thought that I should talk to you about because this is a very important thing. You should have a knowledge about it. You should know why it is important, what it should bring to you. You should know how it is given or how it is chosen. And then, depending upon your temperament and reasoning, you can choose whichever path you want to. Both paths are equally valid. Each has its own merits and demerits. And depending on the temperament of the student, one may choose either one of them, and that would be fine. In the end, I like to thank you for your attention. With this, I once again thank you for your time and attention, and I look forward to being with you in the next class. Till then, goodbye and thank you.